Welcome to the Purpose Driven Mom Show, episode 442. I have a treat for you today. My friend Joanne Crohn and I talked all about mom guilt and how we can reclaim our time, our passions, and our life back as moms without feeling that voice in our head telling us we should be doing something else. This is actually a sneak peek episode into our Purpose Driven Mom Summit this year. Joanne's presented many years in a row, and this episode is amazing. She's going to share some great tips. And if you like this type of learning, you like this type of conversation, make sure you keep your eyes and ears out because we'll be having the waitlist go up for the Purpose Driven Mom Summit very soon. Show notes are at purposedrivenmom.com/podcast 442. All right, welcome back to the Purpose Driven Mom Summit. I'm super excited because I'm hanging out with my friend Joanne Crohn, and we are going to be talking about how to get in control of your mom guilt. Joanne, how are you today?
I am good today, Cara. How are you?
I'm good. We are going to talk about a topic that I think a lot of the moms who are here today are struggling with, and hopefully they can leave with some really great actionable tips, as you always give us,
Mhm.
to feel a little bit less guilty about how they're spending their time, their days, all the things that they do as mom. Before we jump in, if anyone is not familiar with you, could you tell us a little bit about you and your family and No Guilt Mom?
Sure. So I am Joanne. I live here in Arizona, the Phoenix area. I started off my professional career as a television development producer. I was in Hollywood. I was in LA. I hated that life. And so I went back. I became a teacher because I always loved working with kids, got my master's in education. Then I had kids. And I always knew, like when I was a teacher, that one kid I can handle, two kids, it was going to be a lot to juggle the substitute plans, juggle the kids' appointments and everything. And so when my second child was born, I took a year off thinking I would go back. But in that year, I started No Guilt Mom. And so now it's been 11 years later. I help moms get rid of their guilt by improving their communication with their families, really figuring out what they want, what they need, as well as helping them go after those goals that, you thought have been put on the back burner until the kids got older, those things that you can go and accomplish right now.
I love that so much. And especially as like my kids get older, my oldest just turned 18 in November. My youngest is 7. So I know it's wild to think about. I think about some of the things that I have backburnered and I'm like, oh, I feel like really ready. And I'm having these conversations with my friends who are very much in this like middle of the ground unfulfilled stage of like motherhood where they really feel lost. Like they've kind of lost themselves along the way. And I feel like it's
Mhm.
very common. It's sad that it's very common, right? And a lot of what holds them back is that guilty feeling of the martyrdom for our kids, right? Like that needs to be,
Absolutely.
So why do you think that these feelings of guilt and that feeling of I must do for them before me kind of is a little bit more universal than it should be?
Well, it's really built into our society and our culture. I mean, it's everything that we've been exposed to. I think like a really good comparison to this is like you and I, we both grew up in the 90s. And if you're watching this right now, you probably grew up in the 90s and we saw all of the body image stuff. We saw like the stick thin celebrities like Mandy Moore on Spring Break MTV. And this is how we thought that our bodies needed to be. And I bet a lot of us, like me included, I'm still struggling with like, how my body should look and what I should be like. And that's all because of those messages that we got growing up. We have been getting the same messages about what a woman's role is in the family our whole lives. And so we have all of these expectations put on us by society and by culture. And so when we feel this guilt, it is actually, it's an emotion and it's trying to get us to comply with these social norms and self-imposed standards that we've seen our entire lives. And when we don't fulfill those standards, we have all this shame. We think we're awful. We put ourselves on the back burner in order to live up to this role that we think a mother should be. And that's where all the guilt comes from.
Yeah, we were just talking about this yesterday. My kids were doing their snow day assignment or something, and we were talking about abbreviations. And my son was asking about like where the period goes and like misses, and he was saying how he thinks that word should be pronounced and whatever. That's what we're talking about. And I was like,
Yeah.
You know what's interesting? And he was like, I was like, you could have Mrs., you could have Miss, or you can have Ms. And I was like, do you know for men, it's just Mr. Like they're not defined by their marital status. And my daughter was like, what? And my husband was like, oh, here
What?
we go. And I was like, I'm just saying, it's just interesting that there's so much societal conditioning. And friends of mine, we were just having this conversation about last names, and half my friends in my book club did not like take their husband's last name traditionally, and half of us did. And we were just having this conversation about it. And I think sometimes we forget about because the conditioning is so ingrained. The societal
So
conditioning
ingrained.
is so ingrained that
Yeah.
you forget it until someone says something or you hear it. Like when my friend was telling me she didn't take her husband's last name, I was like, Brian, I didn't have to do that. Right. Like, but you don't even think about it to hear somebody else talk about it. So that's why I think conversations like this are really important for us women, is it's stopping the narrative of this is the way it has to be because this is the way it's always been, and saying, like, what do you want it to look like?
Yeah, it's so funny because I did see my mom growing up always putting herself last. And I even went into motherhood being like, no, I'm not going to do that. I am not going to put myself last. But that societal conditioning and those like the cultural behaviors really affect us on a deep level. So, like, inadvertently, yeah, I did put myself last on so many things. And it's funny that you mentioned the last name thing because when I got married, I actually just tacked my husband's name onto mine. So, like, my official name is Joanne Madden Crohn, which has caused me so much headaches in my life when dealing with official documents or like telling like a pharmacist or a doctor's office my last name because nobody ever writes it correctly. Nobody ever does it. Like, and so it's in a sense like sometimes cultural norms and behaviors they help us live our lives easier, except when they don't. And when they don't, it's when it comes to mom guilt and those emotions that are actually holding us back from doing the things that we in our hearts want to do.
Let's talk about that deconditioning then, because I'm not sure how to advise moms. So I'm hoping you have some good advice on like how do we unpack that? Like how do we take these things that we think we're supposed to be doing as moms and unpack those feelings so that we are dealing with less guilt to kind of rewrite our own motherhood narrative?
Ooh, that is such a good question. So, like, I'm not a therapist, but I play one on TV. That's what I have to say because I actually love psychology and everything, and I'm a nerd when it comes to that. So, like, unpacking feelings and unpacking everything is like totally my jam. But I think one of the first like mistakes, first of all, people make when it comes to guilt is like thinking that guilt is true, thinking the guilt is a reflection on you and your abilities. And it becomes very, very hard to unpack it if you don't even realize it's a problem. A lot of moms are walking around and they're feeling overwhelmed and they're feeling frustrated. And if you listening to this right now are feeling overwhelmed and frustrated and don't know why, it's because there's like an underlying issue there. And that underlying issue is probably guilt and the expectations that are being put on you by yourself and by society. And the first step is just realizing that you are living in this era and you have these ideas in your head, and you need to then take steps to unpack these ideas. So once you realize it's a problem and you're here, so we're telling you, me and Cara, that, hey, this guilt is running your life, then you could take steps to unpack it. And one of the best steps is just to look at your thoughts, first of all. See like what thoughts are stopping you from doing things. For example, like I'm trying to get my sister to go on a vacation with me. And she has just had a baby in May, a cutest little girl, my first niece ever, Cara, which I'm so excited. I have all nephews, and she's my first niece. So like I was so excited. But she was resistant to going on this vacation. And she's like, no, I told my daughter that I wouldn't leave her until she was 1 year old. And I'm like, okay. And she's like, and who's going to watch her when I'm gone? I'm like, your partner, her dad. Like it didn't even occur. And then like I was talking to my mom about this trip because I wanted it to be a mom and daughter trip. And as soon as I told my mom about this and like my sister coming, my mom's like, well, who is going to watch her? And I'm like, her dad? Like,
Uh,
so like there are all these different like things in our society that were also brought to us by our families. And so in that conversation, I learned, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is an idea that has been like filtered through my family. And of course, it has influenced me when I thought first of leaving my kids on trips or going places. I'm like, oh, it's my responsibility to watch the kids. So pay attention to your thoughts first and foremost, and then you can start unpacking.
Yeah, I like that. And just the questioning of why, like we have a phrase here in the community of like stop shoulding on yourself. Like whenever you hear
Hmm.
the word should, just questioning, is this truly coming from me? Or is this, do I think I should do something because of whatever it is? Like just the pause. And I think that's really important. A lot of us moms like do not do the pause to process through like our thoughts and our feelings and like what are we
Yeah.
thinking? I think we're very reactive. And it's funny because like, as a life coach, I'm sure living with me is really fun for my husband because I'll just like a sentence and I'm like, wait, stop. And that's how I talk. And I'm like, wait, stop. Like, oh, this is happening. And I like take a through line through and he's just sitting there like, do you need me to be a part of this? I'm like, nope, nope, nope. I'm like, all right, cool. Go back in, right? And I just do it all the time. But I've had to teach myself to do that. So I think it's questioning like
Yeah.
my intent and being
Mhm.
okay with this is the way I want my motherhood to look. And if not, taking the steps, to move it. So that kind of leads me to guilt because I know that you have a fun framework and an acronym for us to help us deal
Yeah.
with the guilt, especially for moms, that I think they can take today to start to think about like the guilt they feel when they want to go after passion projects or spend their time or do anything for them.
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, it's a fun little acronym. I love acronyms. They're so easy to remember. And let's go through them one by one because
Yeah.
that is how my brain works. I don't know if you use Chat GPT a lot, but Chat GPT sometimes will like you'll ask it to do something and then it'll give you all these 5 to 6 questions. And on my like next response, it's always like, can you give me those questions one by one? Because this
Yes.
is how my brain processes.
Yes.
So the yeah, the first one is G, which is goals and the need for them. There was a Harvard Business Review where they surveyed people right before winter break and they asked them if they had plans over winter break. You know, some did, like going skiing, spending time with family, and some didn't. And they found that the people who set personal goals were actually 8% happier than the people who didn't. Now, I don't know how they measured this happiness, but it was a marked improvement in happiness. And those people also allocated 24% less time to passive activities like scrolling and 28% more time to actually socializing, those things that bring you connectedness and bring you these feelings of well-being. And so a lot of people, and I know that goals are talked about a lot in your community, Cara, and the need for them, but it is really imperative to have goals if you want to get over this guilt and to unpack it for yourself. Because if you don't have a direction you're heading in, you're going to be going every which way. And you're going to be letting those messages of you're a bad mom, you're not doing enough for your kids, get into your head if you don't have something else that you're filling your time with.
Yeah, I love that. And the intention, right? I think allows us to move towards that. So G is goals, we're moving to U, and that's understanding your self-talk. So tell us about that.
Yes. So we call this voice in our head Bob in our No Guilt Mom community. Bob is that voice that like tries to keep you safe. It's trying to like keep you from like experiencing that, I don't know, that rejection from your friends, the rejection from society, but Bob doesn't do it in the best way. So we always like to challenge our Bob. A lot of my community members are like, F off Bob. And I'm like, wait, Bob's going to keep you safe, but let's try to
Let's
like
challenge
to do this a
yourself.
different way. Yeah, let's do this a different way. So when you understand your self-talk, you're really acknowledging your own feelings. You're actually saying that, hey, this situation brings me stress. Like when you're in a conflict with your kids, and maybe it's you've talked a lot to our community, Cara, about the stop and drop mom, where you like, you stop everything and you go do something like a Target run. When you start getting out of those kind of behaviors and you're like, no, I'm not going to do it right now. And your kid comes to you and you see how sad they are. Understanding your self talk is really acknowledging your own feelings of being like, this hurts me right now. This hurts me not to be the helper. This makes me feel like that I am not doing something that I should be doing as a mom. This makes me feel shame. This makes me feel a lot of guilt. Because if we don't acknowledge that we're hurting, that hurt is still there, but it's going to come out in other ways. It could come out in higher reactivity. It could come out in yelling at your kids or yelling at your partner, any sort of way. So just understanding that self-talk is the first step to getting through those emotions.
Yeah. And again, this goes back, I think, to what you're saying before about like just acknowledging the thoughts. It's not something
Yeah.
we often give ourselves space to do. Like we feel it and then
Um,
we're like, okay, this is just how it is. And not just saying like why and what's happening and what are the thoughts there. I think it's so important.
Yes. Yeah. And then the next one is impact. And when you think about your impact, you have to know that your actions right now affect other people, especially your kids, because they're seeing them. I mean, a lot of us got the ideas of what a mom should be like today because of things that you either saw our own mother do, our grandmothers do, other women in our lives do, and things like we saw moms on TV do as well. I mean, a great example is the Cosby Show, Claire Huxtable, where she had this great, amazing career and she was still taking care of stuff in the house as well. Although she did have Jeffrey. She did have Jeffrey, which it was great. That wasn't Jeffrey. No, I mixed my shows.
That's fresh. But
That was
also,
Fresh
she
Prince of Bel-Air.
had a great career too and still have
Yep.
help. Hmm.
And still have the help. Yep. You could have a great career and still have the help. But the impact that you have by doing what you want to do, by going after your goals, by like pursuing your own activities, it's huge. Like I remember my mom being so stressed coming home, and I would just be like, just go do something for yourself. And she'd be like, I don't have the time to do something for myself. And I'd be like, yeah, you do. I'm fine. I was like 14. My sister was like 8. And she's like, who would make food for dad? I'm like, he's completely capable of making food for himself. But it stopped her from doing it. And another interesting thing to note is that there was an Oxford study about how parents' aspirations, yes, they do affect their kids. Like when kids see their parents pursuing these huge goals, running their own businesses, kids then get into their own minds what they can accomplish. But what else was really interesting about that study is that your kids' aspirations can affect you as well. Like, I'm sure you've seen this as a parent, Cara, especially since you have an 18-year-old. My daughter is currently 16. She just turned 16. She's driving. But she has this saying right now, which is New Year, New Camden. And so she's like doing all this self-care stuff, going and working out, taking care of her body. She's meal prepping, all the things. And I look at her and I'm like, oh my gosh, you're like such a gift because I am exercising more. I am looking at like what I eat to make sure that I get enough food, but it's healthy food. And your influence on other people is so large. We don't have to do anything as far as motivating other people to change. All we have to do is focus on ourselves, and everybody else changes around us. And I
Like
think that's so important.
drop on that one because I think we
Yeah.
forget the impact that we have, right? In this influencer culture we live in, like everyone's like, I'm not an influencer, but like you do influence people by existing, like in some way.
Oh, yeah.
So when you acknowledge that part that it is, like it's exciting. Like it's so empowering to be like, yeah, I can exist and bring myself to whatever level and work on whatever things and it'll have an impact. And the same with the people that you're around. So and I think I've talked to a lot of moms who are like, not me, just a mom. Like they don't see their potential of impact, and the
Hmm.
sphere of influence that they have, but just this reminder that Joanne is saying today, like, yeah, our kids are gonna influence us, we're gonna influence them. And just by doing things for you and taking care of you and like being this way, you've got to say anything. And I think a lot of times
No.
we have to, and I mean, I'm a talker, obviously. So like, I always feel like I have to over talk things, but I keep reminding myself, like, I can just exist. And like, what is actions speak louder than words type of a mindset sometime of like, let me show up for me. And I know that it has an impact on those and remembering that too.
Yeah, it's really interesting too because like the first time that I realized this was when I was in my early 20s and like I wanted to run a marathon because I thought like going back to 90s culture, I thought if I was a marathon runner, I would be thin. Like that was why I got into marathon running in the beginning. And in it, I just discovered like a sport I absolutely loved and a community I loved as well. So I got a lot out of it. But like all of my friends at the time were telling me I was crazy. Like, oh my gosh, 26.2 miles, you're insane. And then I did it and I was like just posting pictures. I was sharing about it. They probably saw the difference in me. They saw these new friends I had through running. They saw everything. The next year, three of my friends signed up to run a marathon in a training program, three of them. And then, like, it just kept multiplying the more I ran. Even my brother-in-law got on board and ran a marathon with me. So, like, you never know who is watching and who you are influencing at the time.
Oh, I love that so much. All right, tell us about the L in guilt, which is for love.
Yes. So it's for lots of love for yourself. You need it to give it to yourself. This goes along with self-compassion. And self-compassion is like just a topic that has been academically studied by Dr. Kristen Neff. And there are three components of self-compassion. The first is that notice your suffering, which we talked about in the you, understand your self-talk. The second part of it is to know that you are part of a bigger picture. And that's something else we talk about here in the GUILT acronym. Know that other people are struggling just like you. Other people feel the same way you do. And a lot of times, your actions are not a single moment in time, but rather they were created by these actions that came before. So, for example, if you just lose it when your child like knocks a bowl of cereal on the floor and you're like, oh my gosh, I just lost it. I'm such a bad mom, that point didn't happen in like a single moment in time. It was actually, you know what? You woke up late, you didn't sleep well the night before, you found out that like you had no clean clothes because you haven't done laundry whatsoever. You're already getting text messages from your boss about questions about this project. Like you're already on edge. All those things led up to something. It led up to you exploding. So that's the middle part of compassion, that common humanity. And the last part is giving yourself that comfort, which I don't think we do ever unless we make the time for it. It's that, you know what? I'm going to sit here and I'm going to like, I like to stroke my shoulder if I'm in the moment, just because like the feeling of fingertips on my skin feels really soothing to me. If it's at nighttime, I like to go to my bed and read because I have this huge comfy blanket on my bed and it brings me a lot of comfort. So it's going for those things that really make you feel good, really make you feel nice, and could give that love back to yourself.
I love that so much. Oh, that is definitely something in that self-compassion place that I know I like struggle because especially like talking about that childhood through line, right? When you come from a place where that isn't something you received easily. And we were
Hmm.
just talking about this yesterday on a coaching call with one of my members, and she was saying, like, I didn't receive that type of love as a kid, so like I don't know how to give it to myself. And so I think retraining yourself to remember that like you're worthy of that time and space and comfort is empowering.
Yeah. And we also have like this whole productivity and hustle culture as well, thinking that we should be doing something productive at all times and we should be using our time for something that is achieving towards something. And so a lot of times when I like want to give myself the love and rest, I notice that voice Bob in my head being like, "Oh, but you could be doing this right now." And, "Oh, you haven't been doing this." And so it stops me from giving myself that love. And I have to counter it in the moment. And I'm like, that's what I use my my community members' little phrases. F off, Bob. I'm gonna do this and go like lay down and just snuggle and do something for myself.
I love it. All right, so close us out on guilt with the T.
T is tiny steps because a lot of us get stuck in this all or nothing thinking that we have to do all the things all at once to be successful or to do something we want to do. And I'm going to like really narrow in on actually doing something for yourself. It doesn't have to be a huge gesture. You don't have to do like a huge vacation right away if you haven't done a huge vacation ever in your entire life. Like that's going to feel really, really weird to you. You don't have to like go away for a weekend and leave your family. It's all about tiny steps and taking those little steps towards your goal. So, like for example, in our community, one of our members, she just bought her first house. And how did she buy her first house? She did little tiny steps towards it. Her first thing was like, okay, first I really need to know what I can afford. So she made a meeting with the bank to figure out what she could afford. When she found that, she's like, okay, now I need to apply for a loan. So she did that. And she's like, okay, now I need to go find a house. So she did that. And all like they were just little tiny steps she took. And now she has her own home. She's a homeowner. Another one of our members, Anne, she just achieved Sifu title in Kung Fu. And sometimes, like when you want those big goals, you need help identifying the tiny steps. So when I was talking with her and coaching her, we first realized that, okay, well, to get the Sifu title, how do you get it? Oh, I have to be like recommended by my instructor. And so I asked her, I'm like, so what is your instructor looking for? She's like, I don't know. And so her first step was to go talk to her instructor and see what they were looking for. And she took those along the way and she achieved that title. So you don't have to do the big thing all at once. All you need to do is just take the next best step and you're on your way.
I love all of this. And I think that for the moms watching and hanging out today, I'm hoping that like your shoulders have gone down a little bit away from your ear and you feel a little bit of relief knowing that there are steps to kind of getting your brain wrapped around like, how do I do this thing for me without feeling the guilt? So if we could give them one action step from today, one thing you'd like the moms watching to do, what would that be?
I want you to think of something that you have always wanted to do and just think of one tiny step that you could take towards that. Whether it be like getting more information about it, asking somebody about what you need to achieve it, or whether it be like if it's for instance, an activity goal, just going out the door for a walk, going and walk around your block. Just take one tiny step toward whatever it is that you think you want to achieve. And I want to hear about it too. Like, tell me about it.
And we're gonna have all things Joanne linked below. You can check out No Get Mom. Also, with your free pass, you can also click the button below. It's gonna bring you to her Stop Doing checklist. And if you have a VIP pass, you can get Emotions 911. Joanne, will you tell us a little bit about Emotions 911?
Yeah, Emotions 911 is a course for kids. So I am a former elementary school teacher, and this is a 30-minute course to teach kids about how to understand their emotions, how to name their emotions, first of all, and then how to talk about their emotions with other people. I give them really simple steps to take, all the while teaching them about how their brain works in a very easy way for them to understand. So that is Emotions 911.
Thank you so much. It's all linked below. Joanne, thank you for your time today. If people wanted to hang out with you more, where do you want to send them?
Come to my, oh, you know what though? I was like, I just thought of something. So I'm gonna say two things. If you're like an Instagram person, go to Instagram. That's where I hang out. That's where I spend most of my time. That's where I will chat back with you in the DMs. But I am doing a lot more stuff on YouTube right now. So if you want some more parenting information, how to handle your big emotions, how to handle your kids' big emotions, go on over to No Guilt Mom on YouTube.
Great. And all of it's linked below. Joanne, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure as always.